Welcome to Religion, Sex, and Politics, your place to talk about the three things we're not supposed to talk about. If you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell. And if you like our content, help out the channel by sharing this video with others. The famed military theorist Karl von Clausewitz taught that war is the continuation of politics by other means. And if the Russian invasion of Ukraine has taught us anything, it's that Clausewitzians are in full control in the Kremlin. You see, for the Americans, war is the end of politics, not the continuation of politics. In the American way of war, when war breaks out, there can be no further diplomacy, no chance for peace. Americans prefer a kind of peace called the peace of the dead. That's why you can't go to a prison and visit Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, or Slobodan Milosevic. Indeed, when speaking of Libya, Hillary Clinton didn't say Libya was defeated. She said in reference to Gaddafi,
"We came, we saw, he died." Did it have anything to do with your...
America at war uses a shock and awe air campaign that levels a nation's military and civilian infrastructure. It can be argued that America's way of war goes back to the American Civil War. William Tecumseh Sherman's March to the Sea ravaged the countryside from Atlanta to Savannah. There's a reason why Sherman's definition of warfare was hell unleashed to subdue a people from ever fighting America again. Sadly, America has yet to learn that while its particular way of war is very effective at defeating an enemy, it is woefully unable to win the peace. Russia's way of war, however, is a Clausewitzian union of military strategy and political statecraft. Warfare for the Russians isn't a blunt weapon used to unleash hell, but rather a tool that statesmen can use to advance political ends. If we look at the situation in Ukraine over the past 7 years, we've seen Russia again and again demand two things. First, Ukraine must fully implement the 2015 Minsk Agreement, which among other things granted the Donbass more autonomy. Second, Russia demanded that Ukraine be neutral, neither a member of NATO nor a military ally of Russia. Russia negated their first demand by recognizing the full independence of the Donbass. The second demand, however, is being won by war. But war is costly, and therefore Russia has made two additional demands. The first is the demilitarization of Ukraine, while the second is its denazification. If we understand these three demands, demilitarization, denazification, and neutralization of Ukraine, then we can begin to understand Russia's military strategy. This is because Russia treats the war as the continuation of politics by other means. The first thing we can understand about Russia's military strategy, rooted in the political aim of demilitarizing Ukraine, is that Russia seeks the destruction of Ukraine's military, not its citizens or its cities. And this is why Russia has largely avoided attacking towns or civilian infrastructure that keeps Ukraine's cities operating. The citizens in Kharkov, for example, have been under siege for some time, yet they still have running water, electricity, television, internet, and phone service. In the American way of war, these would have been wiped out in the first hours of the war. Russia seeks to capture Ukraine, not destroy Ukraine. But because of this political aim, Russia's military will likely suffer higher casualties, making probing attacks on many residential areas that have not been utterly destroyed by a shock and awe campaign. Instead, Russia is probing the Ukrainian positions, withdrawing upon contact, and then moving around them to encircle and cut them off. Russia's civilian-friendly strategy also means Russia will likely lose the information war, as leaving Ukraine's communication systems intact allows Ukrainian propaganda to fill the airwaves both at home and abroad. This is why America destroyed Iraq's television stations within the first days of the 2003 invasion. But as Russian forces advance, they leave Ukrainian flags flying, local mayors remain in office, and police resume their duties as ever before. Wars are devastating and tragic, but Russia is doing everything it can to spare the Ukrainian populace of such woes. Some are puzzled by Russia's demand for the denazification of Ukraine. This demand stems from the role that neo-Nazi groups played in the original 2014 coup that led to the Ukraine crisis in the first place. Neo-Nazi militias have since been integrated into Ukraine's police and military forces and have sadly killed or persecuted an untold number of ethnically Russian citizens of Ukraine. Many now believe it's hardliners among these groups that are keeping Ukraine from laying down its arms in the face of a vastly superior opponent. Indeed, Ukraine's only path to victory is in NATO playing a more direct role in the war. And this is where the information war is vital. Ukraine must project an image of itself as capable of winning if only NATO supplied aircraft or secured a no-fly zone. NATO forces, however, do not want to engage the Russian military in what would become World War III, so Ukraine hopes it can translate its overwhelming popular support into the political pressure it needs to override the West's military leaders. That's why Ukraine claimed its soldiers were murdered on Snake Island, that Russia attacked a nuclear power plant, and that Russia was indiscriminately using thermobaric bombs in violation of international law. All these claims have proven to be lies, but they're the kind of lies Ukraine needs to push in order to get the military support it needs. This might also be the reason why Ukraine didn't immediately withdraw its forces behind the Dnieper River when the war broke out. Doing so would have made much more military sense, but losing over half the country in the first week of the war would have severely undercut their information warfare campaign. What we'll soon see, however, is the annihilation of Ukraine's army in the east, the fall of Mariupol, and the rapid movement of Russia's forces to the Dnieper and beyond. Once this happens, it'll be difficult to see how Ukraine's information warfare can produce the military intervention it needs to win on the battlefield. And speaking of the battlefield, what are we seeing on the ground in Ukraine? Russia continues to slowly and methodically cut off Kiev from the north, west, and east. To be sure, Russia has no plans to storm the city. And despite media claims that Zelensky has survived 3 assassination attempts, Russia has no desire to decapitate Ukraine's leadership. If it had, it would have launched an airstrike on the presidential palace like the Americans did in Baghdad in 2003. Russia's goal in Kiev is to surround the city, continue negotiating with Zelensky, and lock down Ukraine's military forces in the west, while the backbone of its military in the east is encircled and destroyed in what Russian military leaders call a cauldron. And speaking of cauldrons, the lid appears to be closed on the cauldron in Ukraine's east. Some 30 to 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers are effectively trapped and cut off from its supply lines to the west. Russian forces from the Kharkov front are moving south as its forces from Crimea move north, while the militias of the Donbass advance west. Mariupol, Ukraine's last remaining port on the Sea of Azov, is completely under siege. Sadly, there are reports that members of the neo-Nazi Azov battalion, based in Mariupol, will not let civilians leave despite the creation of a humanitarian corridor out of the city. Further to the west, Russia seeks to win the prize of Odessa, Ukraine's most important port on the Black Sea. The direct path to Odessa, however, is plagued by many rivers and bridges that Ukraine will likely destroy should Russia approach. This is why Russia is advancing north of Kherson, bypassing the city of Mykolaiv, to cross the lower Bug River farther upstream. Once across the river, Russia can cut off Mykolaiv from the west while outflanking the rivers that block its path to Odessa. At this point, Russia's allied forces in Moldova's Transnistria region might cross over into Ukraine to assist Russia capture the strategic port city. Ukraine's west is still an open question. Some believe Russia will open more humanitarian corridors that would see anti-Russian hardliners leave the more vital parts of Ukraine for the safety of Lviv. Russia might also invite Poland to oversee Ukraine's far west, or even offer the area back to Poland, as it was once a Polish possession. Indeed, as the war drags on, Russia has said it will likely make more demands. And as new demands are made, they will undoubtedly factor into Russia's military strategy. Regardless of how the war plays out, it's proving to be a master class on the relationship between statecraft and warfare. We hope American leaders, both civic and military, are watching and learning. They could certainly learn a thing or two from the Russian way of war. Feel free to drop us a comment about today's video. Give us a like and share this video if you enjoyed today's content. It's a great way to support the channel and help inform others. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.